every agent handles offers differently, which is exactly why clarity is everything. We recommend always clarifying the process with the agent because there's no rules which dictate how agents need to handle offers, and every agency is different, and sometimes each agent within an agency is different. Hello, and welcome to First Home Unlocked, the podcast for unlocking clarity and confidence for first home buyers. I'm Jack Elliott, National First Home Buyer Specialist at Alcove.
And I'm Chris Bates, ex-financial planner and mortgage broker.
Together, we are on a mission to empower you with the keys to unlock your first home. Let's jump in. Hello, and welcome back to First Home Unlocked. Chris, how's the week been?
Oh, going well, Jack. Really loving doing this with you and super excited for all our ideas that we've got of client stories and things we've got coming out in future episodes. And going well, Jack, in the middle of winter here, winter salsa this week. So, quite enjoying the sunrises and sunsets. I like this time of year.
Yeah, it's a good time to just be and reflect. And winter's a good time to slow down. So we're doing the same here in Geelong, just trying to keep warm, and the days will start to get longer and we'll be back in summer before you know it. So as you said, Chris, I'm really excited to bring kind of future episodes and then focusing back in on today. So we're up to step 7 in the home buying process. So last week we talked about everything asset quality, and now we're up to making an offer. So you've done your groundwork, you've found the property that you love. Now the big question is, how do I actually make an offer and how do I protect myself while doing it? For many first home buyers, this is where things start to feel real and it can be overwhelming. The price guides, the agent conversations, and the pressure of deadlines. So it's a lot to think about. So that's why in this episode, we're going to give you a clear plan of what to do next. So we'll cover today the important role of your conveyancer, the 2 types of property sales, private versus auction, and what they mean for your offer, how to structure a strong offer, and the conditions you can include to protect yourself, and what happens after your offer is accepted. So I'd like to start by jumping into your role of your conveyancer. So they are such an important part of your property team and they need to be organised before you even think about making offers. Now, a conveyancer is a licensed professional who handles legal processes and documents involved in selling and buying property. So as I mentioned, it's important to organise a conveyancer once you have that pre-approval in place. And your broker should be able to recommend you a conveyancer that they work with, or you can find a conveyancer yourself. Now, each state in Australia has different rules when it comes to property law, and that's why they're so important to have that professional on your side to spot any issues you might miss so that you're legally protected. So your conveyancer will help you review and explain the contract in plain English. They'll spot any hidden legal risks or obligations. They'll be able to add any special conditions to suit your situation, for example, a longer settlement. And they'll be able to make sure your offer is protected, especially if it's subject to finance or inspections. So if you've already lined up a conveyancer at pre-approval stage, you can move quicker and have a much smoother process. And if you wait until after your offer has been accepted to organise your conveyancer, it's just adding extra stress that you don't need to. So Chris, do you have any stories where a conveyancer has saved the day for one of your first home buyer clients?
Oh, look, Jack, there's lots and lots of stories here. I could go on all day. I mean, I think the most important part here is that, you can do this upfront. It's really easy. You're going to buy in Queensland or Victoria. You engage a conveyancer. You get to understand how they work, what their fees are. And you build a bit of a relationship with them. You don't want to take too long, and get someone who's, running their own business. They've got a little team around them rather than a big shop that, some tech platform who you have no idea who you're going to speak to. Because what you want to do is when you do find a property that you want to consider, one of the most important things is actually just checking the contract. And you really need to have someone there ready to go who really knows what they're doing. And, and not just doing it part-time as well. I much prefer to use conveyancers that are, just doing conveyancing and are doing, tens of sort of properties a month. I feel like they see a lot more. They're much more in tune than someone who's just doing it part-time.
I think that's a great point that you raised there, Chris, is one, there's getting the conveyancer organised early, but then really doing your research to find the person or the conveyancer and seeing a lot of properties, helping a lot of properties settle because they're going to help you with that experience and help make the process a lot smoother. So when we get that conveyancer organised, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, we're going to break down the different kinds of property sales. So that's private sale or by auction. So Before you make an offer, you need to know what kind of sale you're dealing with because the way you approach each is different. Now, a private sale, this means the property is not going to auction. So instead, the agent and the vendor set a price or a price range and you negotiate directly with the agent. Now, the vendor is the seller of the property, and the big benefit of a private sale is the flexibility that you get. You can include conditions in your offer like finance approval or building and pest inspections or even a longer settlement date. But the challenge is it can feel like you're making offers with, you don't always know what other people are offering and how close you are to being accepted. So every agent handles offers differently, which is exactly why clarity is everything. We recommend always clarifying the process with the agent because there's no rules which dictate how agents need to handle offers. And every agency is different, and sometimes each agent within an agency is different. So some questions to ask them is there a deadline for offers? Will other buyers be told what I've offered? And will I be told if you get a higher offer? Now, another important point is to let the agent know that you're interested in the property. So playing it cool might cost you the property, and an agent is more likely to give you another chance to make an offer if they know that you're interested. Chris, how do you help clients stay calm when they feel the pressure from the agent or the process of making an offer?
Look, I think your point here, Jack, around sort of not trying to play it too cool for school, I think that's where a lot of first-home buyers get it wrong, and particularly when parents and friends start getting in there and they say you can't say that. I do think you need to be upfront with the agent, show that you are very interested in the property, show them that you have had the contract reviewed, asking them to do a building and pest inspection or reviewing the strata report, show really sign of genuine interest. But when you get to the process and the offer, you don't have to tell them exactly what you're going to offer, but you really want to understand how they're going to play it. Are they going to take your offer and shop it around? When are they going to present it to the vendor? Just ask the agent lots of questions. I think all it just really shows is the agent is serious and you want to make this happen and you want to put your best foot forward. And, and if you ever say something to an agent, you don't ever going to get held to that, right? So, if you say that you're thinking a price, then you decide to offer lower, that's totally fine. So just be friends with the agent here, though, and try to really understand their process by asking questions. And there's no silly questions. The agent actually likes it. It's actually showing that you're actually really interested in the property and that they can work with that.
Yeah, and I think it's about that clarity piece. Asking the agent questions, you're able to understand the process. They're able to understand where you are at the process as well. And it just makes the whole process clearer as well for everybody. So it takes away that stress. You're not second guessing when you're making offers or how are they going to handle this? You know exactly how they are going to handle it because you've asked the questions up front and taken that time with the agent. So we've done a private sale. Now let's break down an auction. So during an auction, buyers compete by bidding on a property. So auctions are unconditional. So that means once the hammer falls, you're legally committed. So you can't include finance clauses, building inspections, or pull out if anything changes after your offer's been accepted. So there's also no cooling off period during an auction. So you need to be fully prepared financially, emotionally, and legally before you bid. So we always recommend getting pre-approval before going to any auction. When you know exactly what you can borrow from the bank and what fits your budget, this helps you be prepared, stay calm, and avoid emotions taking over at auction. So it's really important for you to set a clear walkaway price before auction day so you know your comfortable limit and don't get sucked in when all the emotions are running through you at the auction. So I just wanted to break down a few key auction terms so everyone knows. So the reserve price is the minimum the seller is willing to accept. So that's usually kept private. On the market means the reserve has been met. So the property will sell to the highest bidder. And then passed in means bidding didn't meet the reserve. So the highest bidder may be able to negotiate with the seller afterwards. So Chris, what's the biggest mistake you see first home buyers make at auction?
Look, I think your first thing is you're right. A good pre-approval, real clarity on understanding your numbers, what your deposit you've got, what you can borrow from the bank, and really having a clear understanding of what you can actually afford and making sure you've got a buffer. I feel like a lot of first-home buyers just don't sit down and actually write it down and figure out exactly I can offer $800,000 and $810,000 for this property, but if I go to $820,000, $830,000, it's gonna push me too far. And secondly, I think the other thing is trying to go into an auction with a bargain hunting mentality and haven't done their own research. They're sort of basing what they're willing to offer based on what the agent's telling them. They haven't gone and done their own research and said, well, I think this property is fair value is, $750,000 to $800,000. but it really suits my lifestyle and it really is a good asset. And because the market's going up right now, I want to protect myself. I'm going to be willing to go a bit above that. And I'm willing to go at 820. But if it goes more than 820, I really don't, have no regrets. I'm not going to be regretting it. And I think you've got to have those conversations, not just what you would love to get the property for. I mean, that's always a dream price, but really a price that you're going to have no regrets and you're happy that you walked away. And that price should be higher if it really suits your lifestyle and it's a really good asset. So you should be willing to stretch for certain properties, and other properties you might say, yeah, it's pretty good, I like it, but look, if I don't get it, it's not the end of the world, but I would still want to buy it at a certain price. And so you might go in there with a much lower budget for that property. But it's really testing that. You don't want to be doing that mid-auction. You don't want to be under the pressure of the social, everyone looking at you, the agents working you, the auctioneers working you. They're very, very good at what they do. And they will get more bids out of you if you haven't done the groundwork prior to the auction. And also it allows you to bid with confidence. So if you go in, look, my max walkaway price is 820. Look, you don't have to slow down your bidding. You can go in really hard and you can get all the way up to that price and you can walk away, but you're not sort of second guessing, because as soon as you've got that sort of second guessing, that's what other people at the auction are playing on. They're like, oh, Jack's going to run out of money soon. I'm just going to keep bidding.
Yeah, I think that's really good that you bring up that point, Chris. If you're in that auction and you're second guessing or you're getting a bit hesitant, exactly, people are waiting on that. Other bidders, the auctioneer, everyone there is being able to see you and witness you. So again, it's coming back to having these conversations, working it out prior to the auction and getting that strong pre-approval so you know exactly where your comfortable limits are, and you can walk away from that auction knowing that you've come prepared, you've done everything you can. And if you weren't the highest bidder on the day, well, you knew where your limit was and you were able to walk away confidently from that as well. So now that you know what kind of sale you're working with, either private or auction, the next step is getting a true understanding of what the property is actually worth. So let's start with how price guides are formed and what they actually mean. So when a property is listed, the agent will usually advertise a price guide, either as a single figure or a range. So this is based on comparable sales of similar properties in the area or what the agent thinks the property is worth. Now, every state has different laws, so there might be a range, there might be a single number, or you may have to contact the agent to get a price. But here's what first home buyers need to know. Price guides are just that. They are a guide. So they can change based on market demand. So even if there's a range listed, don't assume that the top number is the final price and don't assume that the bottom number is realistic. Pricing is always a moving target based on the demand for that property. So for example, if you had a house that's listed between $800,000 and $850,000 and there are multiple people offering on that property, the price can go above the top of that range as the agent tries to get the best price for the vendor. So Chris, I know you touched on it before, but how should first home buyers approach negotiating with the agent, kind of starting their offers and then finding a place where they think the property's worth and where they're working towards?
Look, this is really hard when you first start looking in the marketplace. You have really no idea of what anything's going to sell for. Most first home buyers go on a bit of a journey. It's just the rite of passage, I think you would call it. And they get taught that maybe the agents don't say the truth. And, that price guides are usually under what they actually sell for. And what happens is a lot of first home buyers go around and, think it's going to sell at 800, it sells at 900, or it sells at 950, and they consistently miss out on the market. But the first thing what you really want to do is when you're in the market and you've been looking for a little bit, and ideally you don't want to look forever, because if the market's moving, it could be costing you money while you're building up this sort of knowledge. But you really want to be going, well, what is this property actually worth? So you sort of want to have a really good understanding of some comparable properties in the area and having a number in your mind, not so much focusing on their price guide, because all that does is anchor you to a certain price, which probably isn't achievable. Most agents are probably looking, 5-10% above the price guide, particularly if it's a good asset. They're trying to get a bit of competition, and it might even go a lot more than that over the price guide. So I think it's when you get in the market and you go, well, this is a 2-bed apartment. It's in this type of small block of units. Can I find a similar type of apartment that's sold in the last 2 or 3 months? If you go back further than that, it depends on how the market's moving. But ideally, if any properties are like the property you're wanting and they're going into auction, that's nothing better than real-time market knowledge of actually going to those auctions, seeing how many bidders were there, what happened, why did it get that price. One example is probably not enough. You probably want 2 or 3, and ideally, properties you've seen gives you even a better understanding of how properties compare to that. So But yeah, they're price guides. I mean, they're really just a guide for the agent to sort of give you an understanding of where it's likely to sell. But often they're, a good 5, 10, 15% under than what it actually sells at.
And that's really good that you've talked through that, Chris, about looking at it as a guide, one, and then also looking at them comparable sales. So that's going to give you the research and the backing behind when you're starting to think about making an offer too, because you've seen other examples. I like that tip about going to the auction for similar properties and seeing the competition and what it goes for. All this is just building your knowledge before you start making an offer. The main part or point of this episode is that you're getting prepared before you're making an offer. And we're going to jump into now how to actually make an offer and what's included. So you've done the research like we've been speaking about and preparing. You've spoken to the agent, you know their process, and now you're ready to make your move. But what actually goes into a written offer and how do you protect yourself is the other main point. So when you submit an offer, especially in a private sale, it needs to be clear and in writing. If it's not in the contract, it doesn't exist. So here are some key elements to make up a formal offer. So the amount that you're going to pay for the property, your deposit amount and when that will be paid, the settlement period, which is how long until the property is actually yours and you can move in, the conditions. So is your offer subject to finance or building and pest inspections? Inclusions, are there things like appliances, curtains or furniture included in the sale? And any special terms, for example, early access or agreed repairs before settlement. So before you sign anything, make sure every agreement, even the small ones, are written into the contract and reviewed by your conveyancer. So an example of this, I actually had a first home buyer client who brought a home. The agent mentioned that certain appliances like the fridge, oven, and some furniture would be kept in the property as the vendor was downsizing and didn't need them. The week before settlement, my clients did their final inspection and walked through the house and noticed that the vendor had taken the appliances from the property. Now, there was nothing the clients could do as it wasn't written into the contract of sale. So this example just shows the importance of double checking that everything, even the small things, are written and included in the contract. And now a common question I get is, when do I actually pay my deposit? So usually what happens is when you sign the contracts, you'll be asked to pay a portion of your deposit amount. And then you'll pay the rest of that deposit at settlement, or there may even be another payment before settlement, depending on what your contract states. So every purchase will have its own process. So check with your agent and conveyancer on what's written in the contract for paying your deposit. Before we start talking about the different conditions that you can include in your offer, is there anything you want to add here about paying your deposit or what's included in your offer?
Look, I think it's just the way, absolutely getting everything checked with a conveyancer makes so much sense, and you've got to be really careful how you do it. But just remember that you want to be positioning your offer in the best way that's going to get the vendor to accept it. And it's not always money. It could be the settlement terms you offer. So I think the most important thing is absolutely getting everything written down with a conveyancer and presenting your offer in the right way. But just remember, it's not always how much you offer for a property will be the reason whether the offer gets accepted or not. And you want to present it in the best way. The more conditions, the more inclusions, the settlement period not matching what the vendor wants makes your offer less attractive, right? And so we'll talk about that in the next part of what conditions you might be able to remove or not have to have in the offer. But just really focus on the terms as well. And sometimes you need to be a little bit cheeky with that. You might put some special terms in which, maybe give a rent back clause to the vendor. And sometimes you just got to really understand what the vendor wants besides money and try to play to that. If that suits you, then it suits them. Well, you're already one step ahead than other buyers that maybe just have terms that don't suit the vendor.
And I think that's a great point that you raised there, Chris. And how would you actually find what the vendor wants? Well, that comes back to that conversation with the agent up front. Directly ask him, what's more attractive to the vendor? Is it price? Do they need a quick settlement to move out for certain things in their life? So having that conversation with that agent about the offer and then about what the vendor wants is just going to help you set up your offer to be in the best possible way when it's presented to that vendor as well. So now we're going to take a look at the most common offer conditions and why they matter. So the first is a cooling off period. Now, a cooling off period gives you a short window after signing the contract where you can change your mind. You can exit the contract, usually only with a small penalty without needing a reason. Now, this is available in most private sales, not at auction, as we mentioned before. So rules and fees vary state by state, and we've included a full breakdown of the state-by-state cooling off periods in the Making an Offer PDF that's linked in the show notes. So why does a cooling off period matter? Well, it gives you the breathing room to get advice or to think about your decision without losing your deposit. Now, the next condition is a finance clause. So this gives you time to get formal approval organised for your loan after your offer is accepted. Now, this one's more important if you didn't get pre-approval and get yourself organised, and the bank needs to assess your full situation for the first time once your offer is accepted. So if you are pre-approved, you can include a finance clause, but as Chris mentioned before, the more conditions that you include, sometimes the vendor pulls away from that deal or pulls away from that offer. So what you can do here is talk with your broker and ask, is it okay if we remove this condition, and have that conversation, because sometimes it will put your offer in a better stead with them less conditions in place. So this clause is there if your lender ends up declining your application. The clause lets you walk away without penalty. So it's usually set for a time period, for example, 14 days until a certain date. And if you don't get approval in time and you don't have this clause, you may legally be required to proceed with the purchase or risk losing your deposit. Now, the third condition that we're going to talk about is a building and pest inspection. So this gives you the right to have the property inspected by a qualified professional, checking for structural issues, damage, or pest issues like termites. So if your report finds major problems, you can usually renegotiate or walk away. Now, this is particularly important for older homes or homes in high-risk areas of natural disaster or tropical weather. So I actually had a first home buyer client who saved $35,000 just by getting a building and pest inspection, because there was a lot of damage in the roof from termites that he couldn't see at the inspection. The reason this matters is it's a small upfront cost, usually between $300 to $600, depending on the building and the size of the report, that could save you thousands of dollars and a lot of stress. So I think with a building and pest inspection, that's a non-negotiable when purchasing your first home. I think always having that condition in is a great place to start. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. I think, if you're buying a home, what you're really buying is land, but also a building. You really want to know that it's a good asset. There's no major surprises that are going to come down the line for you. The finance clause is common in some states and not common in others, and particularly depends on the market, how hot it is. But this is where I think as brokers who've launched, hundreds of thousands of loans probably now over the last 11 years, and we've got a lot of understanding of if a loan's got any risk attached to it at all. And if there isn't any major risks besides valuation on a property, we really know that you've got multiple options with different lenders and there's not going to be any surprises, then you might say, well, I don't need a finance clause. And that you have to think about it from a seller's point of view. You've got two offers, one's with a 14-day finance clause and one's unconditional without any finance, clause. It's a much better offer. And so, if you don't have to have it, sometimes you want to use it as negotiation, but don't ever miss a building and pest. For the sake of $500, it could stop you losing, tens of thousands of profit dollars and potentially, buying a dud, really. And I've personally gone through this and had many clients where they've fallen in love with a property and they've finally gone and done the building and pest, and it's come back with some really things that you cannot change, or it's going to be really expensive to fix, and you have to walk away. And that's a great outcome, really. It doesn't feel like it at the time because you've had to walk away, but ultimately, one day you'll be thankful that you didn't go ahead with that property.
I think looking at the building and pest inspection, as you said, are non-negotiable. You'd rather pay that upfront cost and know exactly what you're buying rather than finding out in 5 years' time. And then there's a lot more costs involved that you weren't aware of. So I think, as we mentioned, that building and pest is definitely a must. The finance clause, please speak to your broker if you need it, if not, to make your offer more enticing for the vendor. So just the final condition we'll mention today, and this is just for when you're buying apartments and units. So it's the strata report and AGM minutes. So if you are buying a unit or apartment complex, you'll want insight into the building's financials and the condition which is assessed through the strata report and the AGM minutes. So if you spot a red flag in the strata report, this condition allows you to renegotiate or pull out of the contract. So a strata report and AGM minutes will show how much is the sinking fund. So that's a reserve of money set aside for any future repairs for common areas or the property. It'll show upcoming maintenance scheduled that might even require additional financial contribution from you, and any disputes or history of complaints, and the regular fees that you'll be paying. So you're not just buying the apartment, you're buying into a building, a body corporate, a shared responsibility. So with this condition, you know exactly what you're signing up for. Now we move on to finalising the contract. So before anyone picks up a pen, your conveyancer should do a final check of the contract to make sure all the agreed terms are written in, including your offer price, your deposit amount and when it's required, the settlement date, the conditions like finance, building and pest conditions or any other conditions you've included, and any inclusions as well. For example, like we mentioned before, furniture that's going to be kept in the property. So I want to make this point because it's so important again. If it is not signed in the contract, it never happens. So even if the agent or the seller verbally agree, it must be written and signed by both parties. So once your conveyancer gives you the green light, both you and the seller will sign the contract and you'll pay part of your deposit. Now that's when it becomes legally binding and the clock starts on your cooling off period and on your conditions. So now that the contracts are fully signed by both you and the seller, it's time to send a copy straight to your mortgage broker. Now your broker will submit the contract to the lender to begin the formal approval process. And this is where the lender does their final check and runs a valuation before officially approving your loan. So we're going to talk through formal approval and settlement in next week's episodes. Before we wrap up, Chris, is there anything you want to add about making an offer before I just wrap up this episode?
Look, I think we mentioned in past episodes, hard to buy, easy to sell. And I think this is a process where you want to have all your ducks lined up. So when you do find the property, you really take the time to figure out, is it the right fit for you? Is it a good asset, which we spoke about on the previous episodes? And then making sure that you get it at a fair price. You're never often going to get great assets at cheap prices. Just let's be real. Other people are going to want them too. And that's a sign of a good asset. And so you want to see competition. You don't want to be going and playing about to make lowball offers and long settlement terms and all these conditions. It's usually a sign of it not being a great asset. Different times in different markets where, even poor assets have competition and it's hard to even buy, and it's easier to buy, better assets in sort of quieter conditions. But yeah, you really want to take your time, make sure you get it right, because once you have signed that contract, there's no sort of cooling off if you've got no finance clause or no building a pest or you bought at auction, etc. And so hopefully that's really valuable. And absolutely next week we'll talk about the settlement process and formal loan approval. So that was a good episode, Jack.
Perfect. And I just want to go through just the main things of this episode before we finish off. I think the main thing is just getting prepared. We've talked through the different stages before you make an offer. And I think having them key conversations is what you need to focus on, getting yourself prepared before that. So the main takeaways here are always have your conveyancer review the contract before signing, and nothing's real unless it's in writing. As we spoke about, know your numbers, ideally with a pre-approval before making an offer, because then finance delays after your offer is accepted can be stressful for everyone involved. Now, auctions are final, only bid if you're fully prepared. Clarify the process with the agent, and every sale is different. And use offer conditions to protect yourself. So we've created the free Making an Offer PDF that walks you through everything we've covered in today's episode. So you can download that from our website at firsthomeunlocked.com.au or via the link in the show notes. And for any extra support, you can follow us on socials to keep up with everything First Home Buyer related. You can join our Facebook group, First Home Unlocked, to connect with others on the journey. Or you can book a get to know you chat to get that personalized guidance. And all the links for these are in the show notes. So that's it for episode 7 and step 7 of the buying journey, making an offer. As we mentioned in next week's episode, we're going to go through the formal approval process right up to what happens on settlement day. Thanks for listening, everyone. We're looking forward to speaking with you again next week. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Jack. Talk soon.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd really appreciate if you could do us a huge favor. Share this episode with any first home buyers that you know so we can help more people like you feel clear, calm and confident when purchasing their first property. You can join our Facebook group, First Home Unlocked, to continue the conversation with other first home buyers. Or if you're ready to unlock your first home, you can book a get to know you chat by using the link in the show notes or by going to firsthomeunlocked.com.au. Before we go, just a reminder that everything we share on this podcast is general in nature and not tailored to your personal situation. We always recommend seeking advice from a qualified and experienced professional when making financial decisions.